back to Alphos and Sweet. This week we'll be looking at the fallout of the NA Championships meta going into the progression of your local set championship store meta for Azerite C. And for once, we're not going to be trash talking Sapphire Steel. Entirely different conversation. How do you feel about that, Harlan?
I mean, it's a bit of a change of pace. I was saying to some locals, like I do a podcast where every start of the episode we just trash talk my favorite deck. So I'm kind of numb to the opinions people have on Sapphire Steel at this point. But I think it's got a lot different this set, especially with my sort of aggro-based build as well.
Yeah, I actually think there's less reason to trash talk, at least your aggro version of Sapphire Steel this set. There's a lot more competitive viability. We're seeing a lot of people win store champs with it. Although, in fairness to trash talking Sapphire Steel, I think anything can win store champs anyway. So if a lot of people are playing it, a lot of people are going to win with it.
Yeah, it has been that thing of like, I wish that... I mean, I got it to NA Continentals, but that build was like, we had no strength for the Raging Fire in there. Oh, EU Continental, sorry. That was like no strength for the Raging Fire. Like the ratios were still off with the deck. You know, I had like Philosophies and I just inked that every game. That was a useless card. You know, so the deck really wasn't there yet. But that still got like 40th out of 96, so like it still did fine. Yeah, I really wish that I could have like pushed it a bit earlier during the set, or maybe we had like some DLCs where I could have pushed it. But I guess seeing it at the end of the set still working out really well, and I'll admit like everyone enjoys winning a store champs, and yeah, as you say, you can trash talk a store champ sometimes because they're very hit and miss. Like I've won 3, and it's like some of them it just feels like, okay, if I don't win this, I don't think I should keep playing Lorcana competitively. You know, and then there are others where it's like, oh, this has been a real big challenge, like to actually try and get this win.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on player size, depends on the players there, depends on what decks are there compared to what deck you bring. There's just a lot of variance within a store champs for sure. It's definitely not my way of coping with the fact I've never actually won one. I've only ever come runner-up.
Were you quite excited then at the content creator one?
Not well. It's still a store champs. Like I'm jaded in the way that I only really get my adrenaline from the DLCs. You know, the big tournaments. And also, I like to think that I'm better at those tournaments, even though they're much more difficult than a store champ, simply because there's lower variance, so there's more room for skill to express itself because you play a lot more games with a much wider field of competitive decks as opposed to just random jank. And no dice roll I think is a big factor too. I may be superstitious with this, but I've gone through a few periods where I've counted up my dice rolls. I don't believe in bad luck, but my luck has been bad, where I ended up with an 85% going second rate over the course of like 50 games.
Oh wow, the fact that you've had to track it because it was like...
It was that bad, so I started tracking it, yeah.
I think with the store champs though, I've been up and down. I'm like, Stitch, it was new and like everyone wanted to do it, so I was really into it. I was really excited for it. And then I thought the momentum would carry into Ursula. It didn't feel that much. It felt like it was dying out. And then I wasn't particularly amazed or like happy with some of the changes into the Madriel one. Like the top 8s and stuff like that. And I did like 1 or 2, and I just turned up and I played like random lists that I'd never practiced before. And then like I got some Mirabelles and stuff because like top 8 in a small room wasn't that hard to do. And then this time I was like, actually, to be honest with you, if I remember what I enjoyed about the Stitch and the Ursula, it was like the traveling, like the friendships you make and stuff like that. Like I made tons of friends through doing these, like all the funny stories you get from it. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna really try it. And like I said, I've been traveling with my girlfriend to do them, and like on Sunday we met in the finals together, and it was just like fun stuff like that as I've been really enjoying it. So I'm trying to get the most out of them, is what I'm trying to say with store champs.
No, I think that's nice. So that's the crux of where it should be. I mean, I saw the photo, the selfie Ali posted of you two in the finals. Did some numbers on Lorcana Twitter. Everyone, loves a wholesome story.
Yeah, I played 4 mirrors that day, and it's like, okay, this list is picking up a little bit. And only one of them was Ali in the finals. And it's like, am I actually gonna have to tech this aggro BS list for mirrors? Like, come on, we're not there yet.
No, I mean, yeah. I assume people in your local area are much quicker to adopt it when they see you crushing locals with it.
Yeah, I think as well. It's been like me and Ali as well. Who's like she's picked up TCGs like 3 or 4 months ago, and she's done really well with the list, and people are like, oh wow, okay, this is quite a viable list now. There's
Which is
actually
quite a
like he's not
jab
just
to Ali. We're like, oh, if
yeah
Ali
no
can
no
win with it.
no no no. I mean that in like the nicest way. Like she's done amazingly with it. And I think people have like recognized like how good the deck is, and like to be honest with you, she plays it better than I do sometimes. Like I've watched some of her games and I'm like I just didn't think of that line. So that's really awesome. But
You're a lot
yeah,
nicer than me. If I was introducing my girlfriend to Lorcana, I'd just like stick her with like ruby amethyst or red blue and be like, good luck, learn. Maybe yellow green.
I, I think I've given her Ruby Amethyst a few times and said like learn the bounce package and stuff. Well, I'd like sit her down and say learn this, but I think that's good as well because you're going to learn a little bit more like fundamentals of card games, like the value of a card being off the board back into your hand, like bouncing a rabbit. So like yeah, but right now the deck's like it's such a curved deck. Like you just mulligan for 1, 2, 3, and then go from there. So it's really nice.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to dip your toes into card games. I mean, you can learn some of the fundamentals from mid-range and control decks later.
Yeah, for sure. I think we can go from there, and like the confidence as well she's got from like doing quite well at and some of the opponents she's had to play have just been, I struggle with them. They're very good like local heroes, so yeah, it's good to get that in, isn't it? And then you can go, hold on, well maybe I could learn Ruby Sapphire or like Sapphire Steel Wheel or whatever, which I wouldn't say play right now. It's just not in a great spot. But you could go to the Ruby Amethyst decks as well. So yeah, I think this deck's also got that ability to just get you into competitive play.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Maybe that should be the first deck I introduce to my girlfriend. Sapphire Steel Wheel when it's in one of the worst meta positions it's ever been.
And then if she wants to swap, go, here's Mufasa. And you have to play this.
And then if she wants to swap again, go, here's yellow green. Good luck.
I think yellow green's not too bad. I don't think it's in the Sapphire Steel.
I think yellow green's harder than Sapphire Steel.
No, I mean like I don't think it's in the.
Oh.
This deck is doing really bad in the meta right now. I mean yellow green's okay, maybe.
Sapphire Steel's doing better than yellow green in the meta, like the no wheel version.
I think so. Yeah, Sapphire Steel no wheel. I think is still very valid, but like Mufasa's gone down to like fun tier deck, hasn't it? Let's be honest.
Oh yeah, Mufasa's fun too.
And then yellow green, I think is.
Fans.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, guys, but like, and this is coming from a Sapphire Steel. Like Sapphire Steel puts like food on the table for my kids, man. Like, and that deck's doing terribly. So like when I say this, it all comes from a nice place. Like yeah, like Mufasa's gone down to like fun tier. I think yellow green's still viable in a certain room, and then Sapphire Steel no wheels feel pretty solid actually.
I wish you could see the face I just made.
I will see it when the episode goes up.
No, let me try again. Yeah. Carrying on though. Set champs. We talked about that a lot last week. Let's talk about the fun stuff, because I don't know if you're like me. With no competitive event ahead, I've become a bit bored of the Set 6 meta, but I'm super, super excited for Set 7, because last week we just got our first announcement of dual ink cards. Now, I don't think we quite have a confirmation on whether it means you can play them in both inks or just that specific ink combination. I think it would be broken if it was the former, so I think for analysing these cards, we're just going to move forward with that if it's a yellow-green card, you can only play it in Emerald Amber, right?
Yeah, I think that's our assumption, but of course we're probably going to do this, it's going to go up. That's going to be proven wrong or something.
It's going to be wrong, yeah.
But yeah, I think we're just going to right now, for anyone who's listening, like assume that you can only play this card in Emerald and Amber. If it's the card like Lady or something like that we've seen.
And as of like 30 minutes ago, we just got a fourth card. So we actually do have 4 cards to look at today. For the first one, it's going to be Belle. Wait, let me give a name of the card here. It is Belle, it is red blue, it is Belle Mechanic Extraordinaire. It is a 9-cost inkable 7/7 that quests for free. It can also shift for 7 and has 2 effects. First effect is a discount, basically. It's kind of like Chernobog from Set 3. For each item card in your discard, you pay 1 less to play this character using her shift ability. So you can't play her cheaper, but you can shift her cheaper, which is super, super strong. because you want to be shifting her anyway because it's a whenever this character quests effect. So if you play this like in the mid to late game, you drop a Belle down, a small Belle, they don't deal with it, then we're going to be able to shift into it for hopefully very, very cheap. And then we can use, whenever this character quests, you may put up to 3 item cards from your discard on the bottom of your deck to gain 1 lore for each item card move this way. So we can almost view this as a way to, I mean, if it's a really, really late game, to make our deck less like millable by some of the whole new world decks in red blue, and also to just get a free like instant free instant lore. Yeah, I think it's super strong. I think this card has a place.
Thing is with deck building and looking to another set, I'm very bad at predicting because sometimes like a new card can unlock an older card that we hadn't really thought about and made it good again. And I'm thinking of some item cards because you'd probably want to buff the items up in the deck to get this thing out. I don't think it's bad. I think also as well, I'm always that sort of player that looks at where the meta's at right now because it's going to have to shift, I think, to play a card like this because if you're doing all this item and setting up stuff, like, you know, we used to have Ruby Sapphire item and you'd play like Sheriff of Nottingham, you play the Queen that exerts, unexerts, and you get to pick an item from the top 3 cards. Those decks are great, but they're just incredibly slow right now when you can just go Piglet, you know, Daisy, Daisy, Piglet, you know, Sven, reset it and everything like that, and like win with only 4 ink on the board. So I think it's a pretty cool card. I think it's very fun, but I feel like the meta would have to slow down a lot to like get this viable.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of want the meta to be in a position where it doesn't necessarily have to be like super slow, but just at least a bit mid-rangey, kind of like in Bologna, where it was like some mid-range, some late game, and also discard, and that's where Ellie actually was able to take down the Bologna tournament with a red-blue item deck. So I think he's probably going to be frothing at the mouth looking at this card because I think it makes the deck get a bit more lore gain without having to rely on dime.
Yeah, there's like loads of cards, like even in set 6 where like Oswald came out and people were like, I'd really love to make an Oswald deck, but I think you require the meta to not be like, and constantly respond to my board, which right now, even the deck I play is like a dock deck, so it's like, I'm just going to throw stuff on the board, say respond to it. You can't be like, and I'm going to set up these items, so in 2 or 3 turns, Belle is going to come out and do this. You need to, yeah, and I don't think the meta has to be like dramatically slow, but as you say, this like mid-rangey, sort of late gamey, you know, area we need to be in, isn't it?
Well, do you know what I've just seen? We actually have the 2 free. We have a uninkable 4-cost 2 free Belle from set 5, which I've never seen used before, but it does have ward, and when you play this character, your other characters gain ward until the start of your next turn. Not a very, very strong card, but in conjunction with this card, you play it down, and it can't be targeted for removal until you shift, quest, and get its effect off. So really, the only answer to it is like a Tremaine or a Be Prepared or a Sisu, right? Because it's a 2-free.
I mean, it says your other characters gain ward until.
No, but it inherently has ward itself.
Oh, it inherently has ward itself. Yeah. I mean, I've been asked about this card a lot as well because if you were to play Alice, then follow it on by this and just, or you could just not play Alice, you know, the one that gives ward, and play this as well. I was like, yeah, it's all right. But yeah, there's just that thing of saying of like, I'm not that wide of knowledge deck builder that can go like, oh, if we play this new Belle card, we can unlock some of these older Belle cards that are pretty good. Which, yeah, I think is a really good skill to have. I'm always that type of player who's like, set 7, all right, what cards do I put to buff my current deck and just make it better? But yeah, I think there is definitely some world. You could probably get to the point where you're getting that shift off like nothing really.
Oh, you know, yeah, easily in an item deck. In an item deck, you probably got like 10 items in your grave at that point.
If you're at a point where is it each item card? Oh, it's item card in your discard.
In your discard.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's very easily done. Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
yeah, because you just RAM, etc.
You could get to a point. You could sort of work that in now, couldn't you? Like use Vitalospheres, pop Porpsicles, and then get that shift off. Yeah, I think that's very viable. But again, still getting X amount of items in your discard is not the same as play Daisy, turn Daisy sideways. So.
Yeah, but I think you make a good point with like in Red Blue specifically, you do actually have really good early game removal tools that could balance out a card like this.
Yeah, I think you would have to make this work more than like it would just be applied into the meta. You'd have to if you really wanted Belle to work, Because right now, could you say putting this into a standard Ruby Sapphire, like maybe that item-based one, like you
No,
said,
no,
the
no, no.
the
You
gentleman
play
in?
it into that item-based one, and like the
Yeah,
item-based one was not a joke. I actually think like going into the EU
yeah.
Championships, the item-based one was on a comparable power level to the standard one. It
That
just
was
had different matchups.
that was prior to Daisy, wasn't it? As well, Bologna.
No, 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 no. Bologna was, but I'm saying for EU Championship, we
Oh
did
yeah.
testing. We did testing of the item one. It was actually like it had different matchups, but I do believe it was on a comparable power level and was really good into the mirror, especially.
Yeah, I don't think that deck fell off at all, and I think it does win the mirror a lot harder. Because you're doing things and they're having to respond to it, and you're setting up for an insane late game. Um, I felt like I only mentioned the Daisy card because I felt like that's when the game got a bit more like, well, hold on, aggro actually has a place in the meta. Where before it was like you played one questers and hoped they amassed to a 20 lore at some point. Um, or like Merfolk was like the best aggro card. But then we got like Daisy, and then we got like a few more two questers that are very solid as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm just trying to remember that Bologna meta. But yeah, I think this could easily fit into that item deck, and I'm pretty sure that has like some die-hard fans for it as well.
Yeah, which I do believe brings us to the next card. This is Beast Frustrated Designer. It is a 6-cost uninkable. We don't know its stat line and we don't know how much it laws for, but I think we can interpret the effect based on what's already been spoiled. So currently it is Exert, Pay to Ink, and Banish to something to deal 5 damage to chosen character. I think it could very much be Banish 2 of your items. So if you do banish 2 of your items to deal 5 damage to chosen character, you're actually fulfilling the requirement for Belle if you've just got some items laying on the board, which you honestly might not always want to do. But if you just need a way to fill your grave and still get like a Dragonfire on a body, a reusable Dragonfire, mind you, depending on the stat line, this could fit into that deck as like a 1-off or a 2-off.
Yeah, these starter decks, I think they're called single player decks now for some reason, but they always like are a theme deck. So like you had in the last set you had that inventor one where it had like a bunch of cards and it was trying to do like inventor stuff and it used all their mechanics. But in that set you got like Go-Go Tamagoa who was an inventor and that card's like insanely meta. You always have to think about it in testing now. So we could have such some cards coming off that are really good. I think I don't actually know what his actual stats are, body wise. Like, is he a 4/5 or something? But giving red the ability to basically do steel removal at the cost of destroying 2 items, like, I love that just to begin with, because the thing that red doesn't have is that they can, use a fire the cannons or use a Zeus or whatever, but they do get their red removal. So, like, giving them a roundabout way to do that, I like. And yeah, you can fulfill the Belle's requirement of getting more items in the discard. So you could, if it has a decent body, like I could see you ramp and plonk this down on 6. Like if it's a 4/4 or 4/5 or something, or maybe a 5/5, I don't know how they're gonna stat it, but you could set this down. It can start dealing like board removal and board control, and then you just get the belt like a couple turns later.
And there are a lot of key cards with X and 5 as like a key stat line to remove, right? Like a lot. So I think, especially in a more mid-rangey meta, this could, depending on what you're banishing, could be quite strong. I think if you're banishing 2 of your characters, it's probably not very good. But if you're banishing 2 items, I think there's a lot more room for it to work in a deck like the item deck, and also fulfills the get items into your grave requirement for your bells.
Yeah, and as I say, it's like getting belt set up is like, oh, that sounds like hard work for a win con, with getting all the items in there. But even if you play this down and you don't banish 2 items to use it on the turn you play it, your opponent's instantly gonna have to start thinking, right, I either have to remove the beast or think that at any point any of my characters that has 5 or less health could be removed.
I
So
think
yeah, I
the
kind
only
of
thing
like that.
bringing it back is the uninkability, though, and depending on the
Mm.
stat line. If it's a really weak stat line, like 2/2 or 3/3, you probably don't play it.
Yeah, because if you went like Sail into How Far I Go into Beast, it's like, well, that's a 2 unink combo as well. And yeah, I don't know. It's got to be better than the other 6-drop options they have right now.
Which are
Um,
pretty good. You have like Maui
yeah,
Shark, right? Yeah.
Maui Shark can lock down a board if they don't have an instant answer as well. And like, I think the other option is still Medusa, and as instant like reaction, like you get something out of it the turn you play it. So it's not bad. But I'm not saying Medusa's better than this Beast card. It could still be really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns. Oh yeah, you have Medusa Tremaine. There's a lot of unknowns,
Hmm.
and I think that depending on like if those unknowns end up really favorable for the card, I could see it have a place. Otherwise, I think I'm leaning into this card probably not seeing the meta just because again, as you say, there's so many things that compete for the slot with it, and the cost and the stat lines are likely to be too high and too low stats. Because I think the only way this card works is if the cost isn't too high, and if like the stats are survivable enough where you can expect it to live another turn after using its effect once.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, also the fact that it can sit there like a turret and just take things out every turn would be really cool. And then again, actually, for Ruby Sapphire, like, they don't have that Porpsicle and Fortisphere thing that Sapphire Steel does have, which I've always liked because you've got 8 cantrip, like, cantrip just meaning draw an extra card when you play it. Right now, they've only got Porpsicle. They do use the Vitalispheres and the Ice Blocks, but
Oh, this
kind
would
of
be
you
a
want to
lot
be
better.
using
Yeah.
those items. Sorry?
Sorry, yeah. My brain's out of it today. Sorry for interrupting you, but this would be a lot better in Sapphire Steel. You're completely
Yeah,
right
yeah.
about that. Yeah.
This would be a very good Sapphire Steel card, I think. Yeah. Just setting up that thing that can shoot 5 damage, like, instantly creates a tempo board swing because they've got to think, they've got to answer it or like play into the 5 damage every turn. So it could be a cool card.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I think the art's cool. Just for a side note, these two cards have very cool art. I like how they've
Mm.
incorporated like the dual ink colors into the design of the cards themselves.
Yeah, I hadn't actually noticed that, but yeah, it's trying to match both things. Yeah.
Yeah, because usually like Lorcana cards, because we're just trying to match one color, they can end up being a bit monotone. But here we get more of a contrast.
Yeah, they're quite
Great
nice.
great news for YouTube thumbnails.
Yeah, I do like all the ones we've seen so far, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and then next up we have Lady. Would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I can read Lady. Lady, Miss Park Avenue. I assume that's from the movie, and I forget which movie this is from. It's a
Lady
shift
and the
three.
Tramp.
Lady and the Tramp. There you
Yeah.
go. Someone's gonna kill me for that. It's a shift three. So it's a Floodborn. It has the ability something wonderful. When you play this character, you may return up to 2 character cards with cost 2 or less, each from your discard to your hand, and it's the Amber Emerald 4/4, 5 cost, uninkable. I like this in an aggro deck. Um, I like the idea of like, so say from turns 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 even, because we include the shift and say this does get a good shift on 2 or 3. You could get some merfolks out there. You could get some really cheap things and just turn them sideways, which, things that are supposed to be removed. So a
Or you could
card
get
like
some
Merfolk.
ink.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, some ink as well. You could get some ink back as well. You could. I think there's some use in that, and then all you're gonna do is just cycle them and play them again. Because for an aggro-based deck, all you really want is more Merfolks. Sometimes, of course. Um, so I think yeah, and you could even like your daisies as well. You can get the daisy back, cycle it. There's a lot of uninkable cards I know I'm mentioning right now. Um, but yeah, I kind of like it. I think it's kind of cool. And then like say if you played 2 daisies on no, you're 1 daisy on one, and then actually probably have to shift this on two on three, so you have to play the shift target. So if they got like a one drop shift target, you go daisy one, daisy two, the one drop, then you shift this. If they're removed, cycle it again, or you just hard play it on 5 and get the daisies back. So I kind of like it in an aggro deck. I don't really know. It's not going to fit yellow green discard, is it?
Well, I think no, but I think it gives you a lot more reach in aggro decks because let's say you already have a couple Lilos in the grave, right? And you top deck
Mm.
this card, you play it for 5, you bring back 2 Daisy Ducks into your hand, and then the next turn you could possibly play 2 Lilos and 2 Daisy Ducks, right?
Yeah, and for like these aggro decks, like those one drop cards are kind of what you'd hope to draw into, like sometimes as well. So just being able to retrieve them and recycle them is really good. And there has been like those. I think I remember Frank Carsten doing a store champs with a Amber Emerald aggro deck because it's kind of cool. You've got like Flynn's as well, and there's a bunch of Amber aggro cards. You still got the piglets, like recycling a piglet. It quests, they remove it, get it back, play it again. Like, I think it's pretty cool in that instance. I think there is some Amber Emerald like diehard aggro players because remember in set one, way back, that was like the deck with like Kuzco on 5. It was a 2/4 ward. Um, so I think yeah, it's
I
got
don't think
some
it was as
place in the
far
meta.
back as set 1, it was like set 2. Green
That
Fusser.
was yeah, you could play it in set two, but in like set one, you had like that was before all the air
Oh, the
like
just in time, yeah, Cuzco,
yeah, you
yeah.
could. It was like Lilo Flynn, and then you just keep playing the Kuzcos. I think that was before like Ruby Amethyst got its bounce package and like just took over the meta in set two. But I still think people want to play at aggro. Like lemon and lime aggro is always going to be around, I think.
No, I really like this card. I see this like if there's a lemon lime aggro deck, this is in it, right? Like
Mm.
this is such an enabler to that ink combination, and I really like it because I think it makes the deck a bit less one note because you have like a big bomb of a card that you can be like, and boom, I basically draw two, right? I draw two
Mm.
of the cards I want. I specifically choose them from my discard. No, I think it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's that thing of like your opponent's done the work of removing like the daisies or whatever, and then like, and I get them back and play them again. Like
Yeah.
that's just a huge thing. I've
And
actually
they're
just gone on.
unexerted, right? It's not like the Lilos where they come unexerted. Like these are two characters you get to your hand, you play them next turn, and they're unexerted, can't be challenged.
Oh,
It's
for
just
sure. I think
forcing your opponent to answer more stuff.
if you could make, and I think right now, as a guy who's always loved aggro decks and just really hope Lorcana will have some really strong aggro decks, um, I think the issue right now is if you try and make an aggro deck that doesn't use steel, it's kind of like you just prey on red matchups all the time. Because like hyper aggro, the amber amethyst kind of just falls flat to steel. The only one that does decent is like amber sapphire with the the Svens and the daisies and the Alices and like resetting everything. And then amber um, emerald has always felt like the one that's furthest behind because it's like none of your cards are protected. They're all really weak. You hope they challenge them because it's like merfolks and stuff like that and Flynns. But yeah, just more cards that enable aggro. I really like the idea of.
No, I'm a big fan of this card. All right, and moving on the note of Sven's, this is a different Sven.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to take this one
Which
too?
I think I'll just talk through it actually first. Yes, Sven, keen-eyed reindeer. I will mention the thing as well. It's a storyborn ally. I should have said that on the last one. It's got rush, formidable glare. When you play this character, a chosen character gets -3 this turn, and it's a 5 cost inkable.
Two
And
six,
it has
quest
to
for
be,
one.
and it quests for one. Yeah, it has to be chosen character. That's cool. Um, I think when we saw it, like, because we said this got uploaded just before um the we started recording, so we're like, oh, we might as well include this one. I'm always that player, and like, unless it's utterly busted, like, I'm just like, oh, terrible card, bulk card goes in your bulk box. And then you said, actually, no, there's some viability, and then I went to like see what other people were saying, and yeah, I think it could fit in some like flex spots, and like
Mm.
if it's like in so much in a flex spot, you know what I mean, where like like how Belle's kind of been, like you
Mm.
don't always assume there's going to be a Belle in the list, but you kind of do now, but you could be like, you're never going to play around Sven because you don't expect it. Oh, wait, they have a Sven. -3 to Smee, run in, goat, or something like that. So, yeah, I don't think it's bad. I think maybe a 2x in a deck.
Well, when I, as you said, when I went to Twitter, the first thing I did before talking to you was I went to Twitter. I posted it. I went, "Am I crazy for thinking this looks really good on first glance?" You know, foxes, goats, and everyone said, "Yes, you're crazy." But I'd like to stick to my guns here and say I think people are maybe overreacting because in the current meta, yes, we don't see a use for it. Because Elsa is just so useful in the current meta. But I think there are certain metas where where maybe it's a bit slower. People are playing larger cards. They're playing more to the board. You could get a lot of use out of that -3 attack effect. One example is if you have an exerted Tamatoa, you can slam your Sven, your maybe your Smee, and well, not your Smee. This is blue purple,
Mm.
but something else, and your Fox into it. Take out the Tamatoa, and then every one of those cards lives that trade, leaving you with a board threatening to quest on the next turn. So I think like
Yeah.
any time you can get like an on-play -3 attack, and with a rush you can follow up on removing a card. Like the stats aren't ideal. You're not questing for 2. You're only doing 2 damage, but it's still really solid.
Yeah, I think I clicked on Spessie's stream like the minute after I saw it as well because he was going through the cards. And he said like, oh, Blurple got a control card, and like Blurple's wanted control cards like forever because they don't have Brawl. They don't have a lot of control cards, do they? Like they don't have any steel or red removal. I was like, oh, we gave you one. Yeah, it's a little bit different, but like you've got one. It's like, yeah, actually, to be fair, they have got a control card. You can make some really favorable trades with it if you already had a board prior to 5. But then again, you're at that point where if there's nothing on your board and you're playing this, you probably lost that game anyway.
Yeah,
You're a purple deck, you
it's not
flood
doing
boards.
very much otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't dislike it. I think it had some room in the meta, and I'm really liking these dual color cards as well.
Yeah, I think if you play this card, you just have to have the knowledge that you need to play to the board, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the other thing about these slightly more expensive cards is you also have to keep in mind it's for Blurple. Hopefully you are building up excess resources where you can afford to play more expensive cards. But also just, I want to go more abstract here and just be like, I'm really happy with the introduction of dual link cards because I think you get locked. We were talking about this before the podcast, but you get locked into sort of these design decisions where you're like, well, I could add this card that could make Blurple or Sapphire Steel really, really cool, a cool Sapphire card, right? But then it would make Red Blue really, really busted. So by having these dual ink cards, you can specifically help a deck or an ink combo without worrying about upsetting the balance of the rest of the game. So by sort of having, and while it limits deck building in a sense that it can only be used in that ink combination, I think it's better than the other side of it can be used in both of those inks because that would make it harder to balance and would also limit deck building in a sense because then decks would get more homogeneous if they had access to a larger card pool than they already do, right? And then they just take all of the best cards.
I entirely agree, and from our understanding or a belief of how these will work is you could only use this in a Blurple deck, this Sven card, and the same for the others. I really like that, and of course my example is being a Sapphire Steel, like, try-hard mainstay for the duration of Lorcana. You're at this point now where it's like a new card like Sail comes out, and we go, that's great, like, we can use Sail in Sapphire Steel, and then Ruby Sapphire, the deck's worst matchup, is also like, well, we're going to take that as well and they just get and you don't get that like edge on them bad matchups anymore. You just both decks rise, and they can even use that better than you because they were ramping on 2, whereas we tend to ramp on 3 in Sapphire Steel. So I really like this. They can be at this point, and they can use these dual ink colors as such a tool in the game, where it's like, hey, I'm not just going to keep using Sapphire Steel. It's like, hey, Mufasa, or like, hey, yellow green discard. You guys haven't been doing that well for a while. Here's this card that only you can use, and they can like buff like deck archetypes as well. So I think they're in this really cool spot. And even like I say, I'm saying like, oh, they could give a card to yellow green that would buff the yellow green discard. Now this lady card buffs the aggro version of that deck. So it's not like, oh, we're gonna buff specific archetypes. So they are, but it's not like that. I think some people worry the meta might become too tight with these cards. Like they are going to be buffing certain decks, and then the only like 3 or 4 decks are going to be played. But no, all of these cards seem quite varied. Like, that lady card is not like a yellow green discard card, which is the deck that you assume when you play those two together. And even the red blue one, that's the item red blue Sapphire Steel deck, which is again not the one you think of when you think of Sisu on ice, don't you? So I think these are really good ideas. They're really good for the meta, and they should just give some more like support and like lifespan to the game.
Yeah, no, this isn't like Yu-Gi-Oh! Where they're just giving cards to one specific archetype. Like, it's still somewhat abstract. It's just like a finer granularity for if they want to buff specific ink combinations as opposed to 6 different ink combinations, right? When you add a card to a single ink, which I think makes it a lot easier to add more interesting, more powerful effects without worrying about buffing decks that are already good. Because, as you say, if you wanted to buff Sapphire Steel and you gave it Sail, really cool tool. Oh, but one of the best decks, Red Blue, gets it anyway and is now just a better Sapphire deck than you were previously. And it's a really good example, actually, because I think Sail was part of what seemed to disrupt the long-standing balance of Red Blue and Sapphire Steel being on pretty similar terms as decks, with Red Blue maybe a little bit ahead. Whereas in this set, Red Blue has completely swamped Sapphire Steel because it just uses Sail so much better.
Yeah, they were ramping on 2. They got another like they had one jump ahead in Tipo, and now they had a third option that's even better, and it also gives card draw, which is what the deck struggles on. So like they just used it way better. Whereas standard Sapphire Steel, the wheel, we can also talk about the non-wheel version. We tend to want to play the Quill on 3, so ramping on 2 is kind of iffy. So yeah, it just was like, here's this really strong card, but one deck uses better, and you do have that in Lorcana as well. Like if you've got a color like even like purple. Purple's still one of its badder matchups, I would agree, is Ruby Amethyst, because it's using the red package, whereas you're both using the purple package, but like as long as Ruby Amethyst just makes the game last longer, they win because they've got red removal. But I think you can get like, I think yeah, the dual inks as well. You can go really abstract with it. Like you could get like ruby steel, which is like a color combo that, let's be honest, like no one really uses. And you could make some really cool card and say, hey, anyone who's creative, make a deck with this card. It's, give it a couple cards, give it a couple dual link cards or something like that. And they'll be like, oh wow, that's a really good card. I want to use it. So I suppose I have to use ruby steel then. So you can do some really cool ideas with these dual links.
No, you bring up a great point because it's actually an incredible tool. So I think people's concerns are that yes, it could make ink combos building more homogenistic because maybe if you buff the dual link cards too much, they'll just be like no brainers. Include them if you're running this ink combo.
Yeah,
but as long as the designers are careful with what power cards we give to what ink combos, right? Because if you give a really strong card to red blue, then it's just going to become even stronger and it might dominate the meta. But if they keep it to underpowered ink combos, like as you say, Ruby Steel, maybe Amber Sapphire, just anything that's not played very often, then it's actually a way to, while it would homogenize the deck building, because that card would be so strong, every deck would be running it within that ink combo, at least it's bringing a deck into the meta that wasn't there previously.
Yeah, and I think you can also use it, for example, say like, so the Genie that was released in this set, all the purple decks just went up in playability because of that one card, because it was so strong and people just really responded well to it. I think later on in the set we kind of realized that Ruby kind of breaks that card a bit. Like Ruby Sapphire is kind of happy if you play a Genie because they're just going to remove it. But all of the Ruby decks, like an EU Continental's got, the Amethyst deck's got so much more play because of one card. I think they don't want to do that, as you say, in dual links. Like they give Ruby Sapphire one card that's really strong. Instead of making all of the Ruby decks or all of the Sapphire decks stronger, they make just Ruby Sapphire stronger. So they really have to print them quite well. But yeah, I think these are all awesome, awesome ideas.
Yeah, but also for red blue specifically, as we've seen, they're being quite careful with that. They didn't buff red blue; they buffed red blue items, which is a traditionally underplayed version. So it could be that we see red blue items rise to parity within standard red blue coming into set 7.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, I'm super pumped for that. Oh, yeah, wait, we've missed this card.
Yeah, I was just like, I think we've missed one, and it's the Jafar one, which I think we can touch on very quickly, because we've got illusions. I can read through this. So we've got Jafar, newly crowned. He's a 4-cost inkable, 2/4. Dreamborn villain sorcerer. This is not done yet. During an opponent's turn, whenever one of your illusion characters is banished, you may return that card to your hand. Is it super rare? And I think just to start off with, when cards are 2/4s, they tend to not be great. And that's just from my experience of Sisu Water Dragon, I think it's called. It's the uninkable Sapphire card, where it was like, I think Brawl was printed in the same set as it, or maybe it was the set previous. So it's like, well, there's just no point of playing this card, because it just gets brawled, and everyone's 4xing Brawl. And you've got Zeus's as well. Yeah.
I think there is something to bring up here where it's not being played on turn 2 or turn 3, it's being played on turn 4. So if your opponent brawls it, they're brawling it on turn 4 or turn 5. So they are like wasting ink to do that. So it's not always an efficient brawl, right? It's like when you brawl a Genie, you feel bad because you've brawled it on a turn where it's bad for you, right? Unless you're on the draw, then it's maybe okay because you've done it on your turn 3. And in this case, I think it depends a lot on what the turn 1, 2, and 3 illusions are. Because if you set up a board with 3 illusions and then you instantly get value out of trading them into stuff and bouncing them back to your hand, then I think because you're getting instant value from the card, it doesn't necessarily matter if it can be brawled on turn 5 because it would be, or turn 4 because it would be quite an inefficient brawl.
There's also one more card we've missed because that's what the illusions is. And I don't know if you saw Iago.
No. Do you have an image?
I don't know if I have an image, but I'll walk you through it. So it's a 4/6, and illusions have an ability called Vanish, which is when an action is cast on them, they are banished. So like, here is what we've got here. So he's a 4/6, 4-cost, 4 inkable, 4-cost and inkable, yeah. So he has evasive, and this one has vanish. So yeah, it's basically like, I think the actual meta lore of this is that like Jafar is creating these illusions with his power, and you can vanish them because they're just illusions. So a lot of people have realized that if the only requirement to banish this 4/6 is to play any action at all, it doesn't matter. The action doesn't have to be damage based. You could include cards like Improvise and Distract, which were like really cheap Emerald and Sapphire cards, because it would mean they would vanish them. And they also give you like card cycle. Improvise gives +1 attack, or strength. I can't remember what it's called in Lorcana actually. And then it allows you to draw one card. Distract is -1, and then you draw one card. So it's like if we were in a really strong illusion meta, you could just banish all these with really cheap actions. So I think we went further with that, and people on Twitter were saying like, well, because it's Sapphire Steel or Amethyst Steel, you could make like illusion Pete decks where you lock them out from doing any actions that turn. But we'd have to see how good these illusions are. We've only seen one, and I'm not thoroughly impressed by it.
When an opponent chooses this character for an action, it's only for an action specifically, because I was wondering if you could target it with other enter the battlefield effects. Okay, yeah, in that
No.
case I think it's stronger than I thought at first glance. Yeah, I think if you have an illusion build around and you play this Jafar and you maybe play it with a Pete on the same turn, which would cost 7 ink, but maybe you could get some extra value out of that, yeah. Because if you're preventing the brawl, then you're only really losing to a character-based removal effects.
Yeah, so I think you would. I think there are some fun ones. I like the idea of using improvise on these, but you'd be like really predicting there'd be a heavy illusion.
I don't think you'd ever do that.
Yeah,
Like, unless it's like the tier 0 deck in the meta,
yeah,
it's the only thing with the meta share. There's no point in adding cards that are bad for your deck just to
and
counter this.
like I say, this is a star deck, so it's like the theme is like Jafar and his illusions, and these star decks don't always do amazingly. Like in the past, like none of these theme star decks have become meta. Like we've picked and choose some cards in them, but like the whole decks have never become a meta choice. So yeah, it's kind of interesting with Jafar, and it could be playable. We'd have to see if there's like a really good illusion that like is so good you'd have to put Pete in the deck, and if it sticks, you basically almost win the game. I could see them becoming meta, but not really as they stand.
Yeah, but I think I love that the mechanic was added just because we're starting to get some more interesting mechanics, some more archetypal specific mechanics that will make the game a lot more varied and interesting than really in the last 3 sets. It's just sort of been different variations of the same thing, with the only key exception I can think of being yellow-green being the most unique new playstyle.
Yeah, and as I say, is like with the AA going, they vanish. It adds another mechanic you have to now think about of deck building. So you've got Emerald Amethyst. If that deck was really really popular, it has like no target removal. It's all bounces and elses and stuff like that. Sometimes it runs Mother Knows Best, but that's about it. So like that deck would have to start thinking about how to deal with the illusions, wouldn't it? Because it's like, oh wait, we have to just either attack them face on, or introduce some cards that could remove them. So yeah, it's just fun to have new mechanics, even if they end up not being amazing.
Yeah, and they can always be adjusted to become better later. Like not the keyword itself, but the cards using them.
Could
I
we
do
cut
think
for?
one interesting thing about this Iago is, for example, like a Brawl wouldn't be able to take it out, right? Because it can't actually choose it as the action, because it only can choose a
No.
character with 2 attack or less. Alright, so there definitely wasn't a cut, but what were we talking about? I've just forgotten in the last half a second what we were talking about.
Iago being an interesting card, but I think we covered quite a lot of it there. Unless you have any more points on illusions and the vanish ability.
No, I mean I think it's unlikely to be good, but I think it's interesting. It depends on what gets printed, but I doubt they'd print something really strong with a new keyword like this too early, just in case it's too strong.
Yeah, I think you'll have that thing of like, so they did the inventors in that blue-green starter deck, and it was like Go-Go was the best one of the inventors. You may have like one illusion that's so powerful that you just risk paying a 1 or 2 off in the deck or something.
Also,
But I think it's about it.
Sorry.
No. That's what I was saying. There might be like one illusion where it's like, that's mad statted. I don't want to play an illusion deck, but I want to play that card, so I'll throw that in the deck as a 2x or something. Kind of the same way Go-Go's been. Like, I don't want to play a inventor deck, but Go-Go's pretty busted, so we're going to play 2 of them.
Yeah, also, I think if we do receive a situation where one illusion card is obviously better than the others, that almost makes that one illusion card even better, because there's no point teching for a tech card, right? If they're only running
Yeah.
one or two copies and it has decent impact, as long as people don't have a good answer for it, then it could end up being quite a good, like, specific meta answer, not necessarily an auto-include in mainstay decks.
Yeah, it'll be like that Chernobog Amber card where it's like people throw one or two in there. You don't really tend to build a deck around it, and then it catches you off guard because no one's teching for a 9/9 that comes out for like a 4 cost. So yeah, I think it's interesting. It's always great to have new mechanics as well.
That Chernobyl card's actually really interesting with the Lilos and the in yellow green now with the lady.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does make them all go into the deck. You shuffle them in.
Yeah, I mean you'd play him after, but like just the idea of like using your graveyard as a resource and then eventually having it be the final Chernobyl discount finish is pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah.
You can also you can bring your Lilos out of the discard before you Chernobyl, right? So that you can save your Lilos by bringing them onto the board.
Yeah, you could. I think there's some really cool deck building there, and if they put some more cards in that buff that archetype, yeah, you have this thing of like just constantly going through the same resources and just keep like regurgitating, keep recreating the same threats. Because
Yeah,
right
we
now
just
with
need
that
a card
Lilo,
that like mills the top card of your deck, and you lose a stat point for it.
yeah, well, it's like that Lilo right now. It's like, and then you got to deal with it again, and then you got to deal with it again. At 2 costs, it's kind of expensive, but I don't know. It's quite interesting as well.
No, I mean I love graveyard mechanics, so I'm quite looking forward to the direction that those decks seem to be heading in. But I think that is about it. We have gone over all the new set 7 cards revealed so far. So I'd just like to say one final thing is we will be having a break the week after next. These episodes come out on just under a week delay, but we will be having a break because it is our editor's birthday, and me and said editor shall be celebrating it. So when we get back, there should hopefully be double the amount of cards to reveal, and maybe, if we're lucky and Ravensburger wants to send us some reveals for this set, we will be able to show you some exclusive Alphos and Sweet reveals. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, nice.
All right, and as always, shout-outs are you can find me here, here, and here. And I'll do coaching again, I guess, once the next DLC comes up. And then for Harlan, he won't do coaching because he's sick of teaching you all, but he still makes videos to teach you for free.
Yeah, I have to have the barrier as I'm so socially awkward. I need the barrier of a YouTube video. But there's loads of videos on the channel if you're hoping to play the new deck that we've been playing, the Kiwi Birds build.
Very flattered
yeah,
you named it
over.
after me.
Yeah, no, it was all you. And I didn't even mean that name to get public. Like Inkdex took that from my dream board and then like posted it everywhere, and I was like, well, I guess it's called this now. So it's all good.
Very funny. All right, well, bye-bye. Thanks for watching.
Bye.